this evening we're going to start out with a presentation by our founder. I'm going to introduce him in a minute, followed by some of your questions. We have many questions from health practitioners. That'll be facilitated by a health practitioner herself, Connie Lewis. And then we're going to have a few practitioners share their love of the Lifewave products and the business. And then we're going to be done. So it is my pleasure to introduce our founder. He's the founder of Lifewave. He's a CEO and inventor. And this man has over 100 patents and patent pendings. He was one of those young guys that just loved to figure out how everything worked. And he used to take things apart and most of the times put them back together. But over the years, he just became, started inventing things, and his technology has made a huge contribution. He's absolutely committed to the science behind his inventions to validate its effectiveness. Why we have so many practitioners that love to be in Lifewave. And he invests millions and millions of dollars into the science and will continue to do that because his passion is to improve the quality of life of people around the world. So it is my honor, my privilege to introduce to you David Schmidt.
Great, thanks so much. And hey everybody, this is David Schmidt, and thank you so much for being here this evening. And we are going to be going over X39, stem cells, light therapy, the mechanisms behind how all of this works. And I think you're going to find it really interesting because we're going to be exploring some very interesting material together. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I understand we have quite a few healthcare practitioners on the line with us. Thought I might dig a little bit deeper into this presentation on the science than what we might normally do. So when we're talking about light therapy, what is so exciting about this is the idea that we can trigger very specific biochemical changes in the body with light. And we think about this, this is really extraordinary. If we looked at the pharmaceutical model, we know that a pharmacologist could spend their entire career, they could spend 20 years trying to figure out how to engineer and create a new drug to activate a specific receptor in the cell to produce a specific effect. So what's exciting about this is that we can use light to initiate biochemical changes in the body. And of course, because we're not introducing any foreign chemicals, there aren't going to be any side effects to this. So let's dig into this in a little bit more detail. How exactly does this work? Well, first thing is we often use the analogy that everyone accepts that you go out in the sun and sunlight is going to trigger a release of vitamin D. So very clear example that we all know to be true of how light will cause a chemical change in the body. This area is known as photobiomodulation. And one thing that's very interesting is that if we go back 10 years ago, the biochemical mechanisms for photobiomodulation, or another way we can think of it is low-level light therapy, the biochemical mechanisms weren't really very well understood. If we go back 20 years ago, light therapy was relegated to the area of quackery. Traditional scientists thought, no, this is a placebo effect, there's really nothing to it. And today, with over 5,000 clinical studies that have been published with people like Dr. Michael Hamblin at Harvard University doing pioneering research, Dr. Hamblin has over 400 clinical studies that are published. The mechanisms by which light therapy works and produces these changes are very well understood. Our company, Lifewave, has performed over 80 clinical studies in the last 18 years. So we have created an enormous body of scientific research that tells us how the patches work. Okay, well, let's just start over here. We see we have different wavelengths of light, and in this example, the wavelengths are in the near infrared band, but we can see cellular change in the visible band of light as well. But what's generally accepted is that, and what has been demonstrated and shown, is that wavelengths of light in the near infrared are going to increase production of cytochrome C oxidase. And this is, of course, very significant and important because of cytochrome C oxidase's role in the electron transport chain. And the electron transport chain, of course, is involved in producing energy from carbohydrates and fats in the mitochondria. So net end result is that we can use light to elevate energy production in the cell, and as a result, that net increase in energy in the cell can be used to drive different chemical processes. So if we want to, in our case, synthesize a naturally occurring peptide in the cell, this is going to be the pathway under which we're going to do that. As I mentioned, there are thousands of studies that are going to be in the literature. We're not going to have the time this evening, of course, to do an exhaustive accounting of all those studies. But just suffice it to say that here would be an example of a study where using near infrared light to elevate cytochrome C oxidase is demonstrated and shown, and you can see that in the results of the study when you scroll down. Okay, now, why should we be concerned about this? Well, one of the reasons is that if we are interested in stem cells and regeneration, and we want to avoid some of the negative effects of stem cells, meaning that you inject stem cells, they're expensive, they don't always work. There can be contraindications. Sometimes the stem cells will divide in ways that are not beneficial or healthy. This certainly happened in the early days of stem cells. What if we could use light to elevate a peptide known to influence the activity of stem cells in the body? And that's exactly what we're doing here. Now, Dr. Lauren Picard has spent over 45 years investigating copper peptide. As a matter of fact, he is the scientist that discovered copper peptide. And there's two peptides here that we're interested in, GHK and GHKCU. The difference is that what we've seen in our studies, which I'll show you in a moment, is that first X39 will elevate GHK, and then GHK will bond with copper ions. It has a very high affinity for copper, and both GHK and GHKCU are going to show a number of metabolic benefits, but specifically, we're going to look at the role of GHKCU in stem cells. So here is a study that I think you would find of interest because it shows the role of GHK in regeneration. This was published in 2015. And the mechanism is extraordinarily interesting. When we think about how are human beings going to benefit from stem cell therapy, we often think in terms of injecting young, healthy cells into the body. And that's certainly one way to do it. But what if we could take the endogenous, naturally occurring stem cells that are already in our body and get them to function like younger, healthier cells? And this is one of the really exciting things about copper peptide. You can see here that one of the things that was discovered by Dr. Picard is that about 4,000 genes are regulated, either up or down regulated, but essentially resetting those genes to a younger, healthier state. So this means that the stem cells can behave like younger, healthier cells. Here's a later study that was published in 2018. And when Dr. Picard began to see the regenerative effects of copper peptide, he then, of course, naturally concluded that copper peptide must be showing a role in stem cells. And of course, it turned out that he was correct. And what is actually going on here? Several things to be very interested in. First, copper peptide is going to reset cells to a younger, healthier state by altering gene expression. Then those stem cells are mobilized through increased expression of P63. And here is a study that was actually looking at that. What happens when you elevate copper peptide in the skin? Now, not only will copper peptide increase the ability of stem cells to get to an injury site, but in addition, copper peptide has been found to revert the stem cells in the skin to pluripotent stem cells. So this means the total number of circulating stem cells increases. And in other studies that have been published, this leads to regeneration of damaged tissue. So we, of course, have done a significant number of studies, and you can find them here. We're not going to have time to go over all of these this evening. We have 9 clinical studies that we've completed so far on X39. Because of COVID, there have been delays in getting those published. We have one in particular I'm really excited about. It's a 50-person double-blind study on looking at X39 on how it elevates copper peptide. We have the predecessor to that that you can see here that was published. But basically what we show is that within the first 24 hours, X39 elevates GHK. And this is why when you look at metabolic studies that we've done on X39, it shows that most people are going to start to feel results in as little as 24 hours, and vast majority within the first 7 days. Okay, let's back up a little bit here. Let's restate this problem. The problem is that as we age, the stem cells are aging with us. This, of course, has to do with the Hayflick limit. There's a limited number of times that cells can divide, and the stem cells are subject to the Hayflick limit along with the rest of the cells. So quite simply, when we get to around age 70, age 75, our cells stop dividing. And this is really bad news. Anybody that has gotten over the age of 60 or 70 knows that their ability and their capacity to heal and recover from an injury has slowed down dramatically. This is a result of a degradation in the quality of the stem cells, their ability to proliferate, their ability to release growth factors, and eventually, of course, we don't have any more stem cells. So most of the solutions that companies are looking at is, let's take young, healthy stem cells and inject them into the body. And there is not a major success of this that's available today. Most governments have not approved stem cell therapy. There's only limited, very limited approvals. Most of this has to do with bone marrow transplants. And that's because there are significant risks that are associated with injecting stem cells. If they don't divide the way that they're intended to be used, they could divide into cells that are not supposed to be in the tissue where they are injected. So for example, in Japan, there has been ongoing research into Parkinson's disease. And there's a human study going on right now where a needle is inserted into the brain and stem cells are injected directly into the brain. Well, when this research first started, stem cells divided into muscle tissue, liver tissue, hair, and the animals ended up dying because the stem cells divided from a pluripotent state down into a multipotent state that was not desirable. The division was uncontrolled. So these are some of the risks associated with stem cell science as it is today. But of course, that's going to change in the future. So what we want to do is make stem cell science affordable, safe, effective, and available to everybody. So how are we going to do that? Well, as Robin was saying, I have over 100 patents now. I reached that milestone this year. Those are 100 issued global patents, with many more that are pending. And over 70 of those are just in the field of stem cells and regenerative medicine. And we've spent over $4 million over the last 12 years in developing X39. And research, of course, is ongoing as we find new ways to utilize our technology with respect to stem cells. Some of the early research we did was with the National University of Ireland in Galway at their Regenerative Medicine Institute. This research was actually funded by Scientific Foundation Ireland. And Remedy, by the way, and NUIG is in the top 2% of universities globally in the field of stem cell research. So when you go over to the west coast of Ireland and you're at this institute, you can find all of the major healthcare companies doing research there. In any case, this is a technology that I invented and we developed at our laboratories in San Diego. And this is a novel form of electromagnetic therapy that we have shown can mobilize and activate stem cells. This was a standard rabbit model that we used after we went from our initial laboratory work. And the goal here was to see if we could upregulate or increase the rate of wound healing in these rabbits. So a diabetic ulceration was formed over a period of 7 days. And then we had a control group and a group that was treated with this electromagnetic coil. And we looked at the rates of regeneration. And in this very first trial, we were able to hit statistical significance and see that just using energy, we could activate the stem cells. We didn't need to use a stem cell injection. Now, what was also really significant about this study is that when you apply stem cells directly to the site of a ulceration, the rate of wound closure is identical to applying an external electromagnetic field. So this was the first indication that we had that you didn't have to give a stem cell injection. And that was really exciting. We could use energy to activate the stem cells in a body and accelerate wound healing, plus all of the other amazing benefits associated with stem cells. Now, at our labs in San Diego, we use a standard stem cell model. This is a planaria, and planaria have remarkable regenerative capabilities as a result of the sheer number of stem cells that are located in their bodies. And when you cut off the head of a planaria, it will regenerate in 17 days. The stem cell community is trying to figure out how could we get that down to 15 days? If we could do it maybe in a planaria, maybe we could do it in human beings. Well, this technology that I just showed you, we were able to get the regeneration down to 8 days and then eventually under 1 day. So imagine that, being able to regenerate the head of a worm in less than 1 day. What if we could apply a technology like that to human beings? That's going to be, of course, our ultimate goal. But this technology is very expensive, and so we want to be able to offer an affordable way for people to activate stem cells. So how do we do that? And how would this technology work? Okay, well, we are going to turn to light therapy for the answer to this, because I have been developing light therapy products now for 20 years. We have quite a bit of experience and knowledge in how to activate different biochemical pathways in the body with light. And we want to look at how can we do this? What are the control mechanisms for stem cells in the body? So the way this works is that instead of using a lamp or an LED or any type of electronic device, we're going to use a passive patch. You simply apply the patch to the body, and the patch will stimulate the skin with light. So we're not putting any chemicals from the patch into the body. The materials in the patch are completely sealed, and these materials are activated by your body heat. The patch will stimulate the skin with light and produce a biochemical change. So just like sunlight will cause the body to make vitamin D, this technology will stimulate the skin with light, elevate copper peptide, and this will activate the stem cells. And by the way, for the practitioners that are here this evening, when we use the term activate, this is just another way of saying that we are enhancing the ability of the stem cells to proliferate and go to where they're needed. And that, of course, is going to be the site of inflammatory cytokines where there's an injury. We know stem cells are attracted to that type of inflammation. So very simple way to think about this is that this is a new form of low-level light therapy. And we're using low-level light to elevate GHK-Cu, or copper peptide. And so, of course, the advantages of copper peptide are extraordinary. We get to reset thousands of genes to a younger, healthier state. As a matter of fact, in early research, if you were to take for example, liver cells from somebody 75 or 80 years old, put them in a solution of copper peptide, those cells start to behave like younger, healthier cells. If all we were doing with X39 was just simply allowing old stem cells to get to an injury, that of course would not be very effective. So what really makes this product effective is the fact that copper peptide is a very powerful gene modulator, can get those stem cells to act like younger, healthier cells, and of course now they can release growth factors, their motility rate increases, and people can experience healing at ages when normally they would not be able to. Okay, so we've got 9 studies on X39. First question is, how do we know that the X39 patch elevates copper peptide? So that was one of the first studies we did. It actually took us about a year to get through just method development. So we had to develop methods. We worked with 2 different laboratories, and these were microanalytical labs. And first we looked at urine analysis. Could we detect copper peptide in the urine? Then eventually we landed on doing blood studies, and the method development led to a procedure where we could detect copper peptide in blood. So this was our first pilot study. It was with 10 people. We've since repeated this, and we have a double-blind study now. Generally, when we want to look at copper peptide levels, we like to have people that are over the age of 50 or 60. The reason is copper peptide levels are going to be much lower in that group. So if we were going to compare copper peptide levels to people over the age of 60 compared to people in their 20s, levels of copper peptide are down 60 to 80% when someone's over the age of 60. We also want to find out if, this is light therapy, so we should be able to see an effect rapidly. So we want to look at taking a baseline and then doing another blood draw 24 hours later. And then as a matter of convenience, we look at a 7-day period. And very clearly, what we see to statistical significance is that within the first 24 hours, we see increases in GHK. We also see increases in GHK-Cu, but not to statistical significance at 24 hours. But of course, at day 7, we are well into statistical significance. Now, we've also done metabolic testing with X39. And this is important. This was we did 2 studies here. The first was a pilot. The second was a 50-person double blind. Again, mean age was over the age of 60. And we want to look at short-term benefits. What happens to the metabolism in the first 24 hours and in the first 7 days? Well, one thing we were interested in was looking at synthesis of amino acids. And we saw that amino acids were upregulated. So, for example, we looked at the branch chain amino acids like leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And this was important because we had anecdotal information that athletes were recovering much more quickly from exercise. So we saw about a 30 to 40% increase in upregulation of leucine. So I think we've got some pretty good evidence that through elevating leucine, we're activating mTOR, increasing muscle protein synthesis. And of course, this is going to be very valuable, not only in recovery, but also for any athlete or anyone that wants to improve performance. As another example, we also saw an upregulation of tryptophan. And that was interesting because in the early days of studying X39, we saw that people were getting improved levels of sleep. We eventually measured GABA levels, and we saw GABA levels being upregulated as well. So we indeed were able to determine why people were experiencing improvements in their quality of sleep. We also saw improvements in memory with X39, and I'm going to show you another study, a separate study that we did looking at the brain. Very interesting, we saw statistically significant decreases in blood pressure in people that had elevated blood pressure. We also did measurements with heart rate variability. And for those of you that are not familiar with that, that looks at the ratio of muscle contractions in the 4 chambers of the heart. And this is important because heart rate variability can detect abnormalities in the function of the heart. And we saw improvements in heart rate variability. Overall vitality, we saw improved. Even breathing improved. Okay, and then on to brain mapping. And I'm going through this quickly so we can get to your questions. We can actually, do a much deeper dive into each of these studies. But just going through quickly because I know there are a lot of questions tonight. We have the privilege of working with Dr. Gaetan Chevalier. We've been working with Dr. Chevalier now for over 10 years. And Melinda Connor, actually, Dr. Melinda Connor, we've been working with her for about 10 years as well. Incredible researchers, and it's a privilege to work with them and their teams. Well, Dr. Chevalier was doing research into nuclear fusion at UCLA. He's an expert in laser spectroscopy. And some of our early studies that we did with him were looking at biophoton emission. And we saw that with our Lifewave energy enhancer patches, we could actually bring the cells into greater coherence, and this would improve biophoton emission from the cells. So this is a very powerful anti-aging effect. We also had run a study looking at upregulation of mitochondrial function. We did that study with Dr. Frank Schallenberger and Dr. Homer Nazaran at the time. Dr. Nazaran was at the University of Texas in El Paso, their biomedical engineering department. And so we saw directly that stimulating the skin with light would increase mitochondrial function. Any case, in this study, what we wanted to do was use a P300, it says here P3, it was a P300 EEG brain mapping system. This was the pilot study. There were some delays in getting started with the double blind because of COVID, but now the double blind study on this is underway. One thing that's important is that all 12 people in this open label study had dramatic effects. And we worked with people over the age of 60. And this is really significant because we would not expect, even with the effects of neuroplasticity, we would not expect to see changes this dramatic in a section of the population that is over the age of 60 and 70. But here at session 1 is baseline, session 2 is at 3 weeks, and session 3 is at 6 weeks. And what's happening is that the brain is shifting into a greater state of coherence. If we want to solve the problem of aging, the problem of aging can really be thought as a state of our bodies going from perfection, from the divine design, from a state of coherence and balance into a state of disorganization. And we see this over time, the degradation of the structure of the cells. Well, what would happen if we could reverse that and bring greater coherence to the cells and, of course, on the macro level as well? And this is what we see with our products, that they establish greater coherence. And this is some proof of that. Here's the 67-year-old man. Now, I want to highlight the difference between these two because most people are going to see results with X39 within the first week and their first month using the product. Most people are going to get great results. Some people, however, require a little bit more time, maybe about 10 or 15% of the population. So if you have a patient that's using X39 and they don't see the results the first 3 or 4 weeks, that would not necessarily be unusual. You can see by session 3 here at 6 weeks, already there's a very significant improvement as compared to baseline. So some people are going to take a little bit longer, but it's only about 10 or 15% of the population. Okay, and then just moving quickly now, many of you might have already seen these testimonials, so we'll go quickly through them. But some of the dramatic effects we see with X39 are in the area of wound healing. So sometimes it can be a scar that's more than a year old. Even we've had people with scars that were 18 years old. They still saw a dramatic reduction in the appearance. Or here, this is just after 2 weeks on a more recent scar. X39 can be applied behind the neck, below the belly button, and it will produce a systemic effect. Some people prefer to put the patch at the site of an injury, and of course, that's fine too. So this is a young man who had a job interview coming up, and he was in an accident, and you can see within 5 days, he experienced a dramatic result. This one's really extraordinary. I was meeting with a doctor yesterday, and we were discussing a study on X39, and I showed him this picture, and he was absolutely blown away. Here's a gentleman that was in a car accident, nearly lost his hand, and yet 2 months later, virtually no sign of that injury. So this is the power of resetting stem cells to a younger, healthier state. This is also, I mean, just incredible. This is a young boy, 9 years old in Denmark, caught his finger in a door, had it severed off. The doctors reattached it. You can see initially it turned black. The parents applied X39, and only 2 months later, the finger is back to normal. The doctor was astounded and said they didn't think that this was possible, and even still, they would have expected more like a 9-month recovery. Now, of course, stem cells, while they do a great job with wound healing, they certainly have very, very powerful anti-aging effects. And one of the things that stem cells do really well is make collagen. Of course, collagen is the most abundant protein in the body. And we know that as we age, there is a decrease in our levels of collagen, and hence this is going to lead, partially, that's going to lead to formation of lines and wrinkles. And this is a woman, her name is Mandy. She is in Australia, and you can see very dramatic result after 6 weeks. And she was thrilled with the results. She continued to use X39, and you can see dramatic change after 1 year. Now, this was actually the very first, I'll call it, youth renewal testimonial that we received on X39. This woman lives in Denmark. She's 93. Her daughter is a Lifewave distributor. The mom here was dealing with a number of very significant health challenges. And so the daughter gave her X39 in the hopes that it could help support her health. And everyone was truly shocked at the transformation that she went through in only 2 months. So this is all to say that through our research and through practice, we have found that you don't have to have injections of stem cells, that activating the stem cells with copper peptide can lead to remarkable health benefits. One area that we are interested in exploring actually is, well, what happens when you elevate copper peptide and you give a stem cell injections? Would the benefits be even greater? That's an area that we tend to explore in our clinical research. We tend to feel that there could be some synergies there that are really worth exploring. So, Robin and Connie, I'm be happy to take some questions now.
David, that was amazing. I love listening to you.
Oh,
And
thank you. You're very kind.
yeah, well, it's changed my life. And Dr. Chevalier's work, I'm 66, and I think people in my age range and older, and even some younger, have an underlying concern of cognitive decline. So that's very, very exciting for people, just for that one reason alone. And, I have so many of my own testimonials, but my most recent one was a very rapid recovery from a total knee replacement. My orthopedic surgeon was blown away. And all I did was ask him to research the copper peptide, GHKCU. And he did his homework and he said, I'm intrigued. He's a Hall of Fame football player from BYU. So I think
Oh, wow.
it can help him too with some of the residual aches and pains from his background. So thank
Robin,
you.
I think it's worth just mentioning really quick. We have a study that we're doing, and it is with a very prominent organization. I'm not going to say who it is now, but it could lead to very, very big things for Lifewave. But we are looking at both X39 and carnosine because both independently have shown improvements in cognitive function. So we're very excited about that. But in our studies with carnosine and X39, we have shown that we can reverse normal age-related declines in cognitive function, improving short-term, long-term memory, and even speed of processing. So this, is something now that people do not have to fear as a result of normal aging. And that's, of course, incredibly exciting.
Beyond exciting. Especially for people that are caregiving their parents and dealing with, It's such a challenging situation. So now it's time to hear from you guys because lots of you sent questions, and we can't get to every single one of them. But we're going to have Connie Lucas, a certified healthcare practitioner and educator, serial entrepreneur, someone who has joined the business, has become a very special friend and colleague with me, to come on board and ask you some of these great questions that you practitioners have sent in to us. So come on in, Connie. There you are.
Hello, hello, hello. Nice to see you all. David, thank you so much for doing this again with us. I really appreciate your time. And I think you can see I've been astounded. Robin alluded to it earlier, but I've been astounded how many medical practitioners who have never considered bringing an MLM company into their practice are beyond excited to bring Lifewave into their practice. They're seeing that the technology is so powerful that this is at the leading edge of science. And so you can see by us having, well over 500 people tonight and a vast majority of medical practitioners, just the excitement around it. So we pulled some of the questions from these practitioners, and you've actually addressed a couple of them.
Okay.
So, you addressed a little bit about the idea of the enhanced clinical outcome when somebody is using stem cell activation in their practice.
Right.
Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, you mean when a practitioner is going to be giving an exogenous injection of stem cells, right?
Correct.
Yeah, this is a very interesting area to explore. One of the reasons to be interested in copper peptide is because of its ability to help regulate and manage inflammation. Another patch that practitioners should be looking at is the Eon patch for exactly the same reasons. So one of the things that was discovered in La Jolla, California, was that stem cells are attracted to inflammatory cytokines. So if we went through the cycle of first there's an injury, then there's an increase in oxidative stress, then there's inflammatory stress. All of these things we often think of oxidative and inflammatory stress as being really bad things, but only if they're not managed properly. But these molecules are really powerful because they can help to keep down infection and also signal stem cells to be attracted to the injury site, and then of course start the healing process. Well, the problem is that when the stem cells get to the site of the injury, especially in people that are older, the inflammation, as inflammation hangs around, it will decrease the total population of stem cells. And this is one of the single biggest challenges that researchers in stem cells face. So now imagine you can introduce copper peptide. Copper peptide is going to have a number of critical benefits for when there are external or exogenous injections of stem cells. First thing is copper peptide is going to attract immune cells over to the site of the infection. And in research studies, it was shown that the incidence of infection actually drops to only 3 to 6%. That's compared to over 30% risk of infection without copper peptide. So clinically, that's of value. The other thing, of course, that's going to happen is copper peptide is going to help to manage the inflammation associated with the injury, and this will increase, we think, the survivability of those exogenous stem cells. So that's where I would see the synergy between stem cell injections and X39.
Absolutely. That's perfect. And that was from Dr. Owen, MD. And then Dr. Stewart, who's an MD, you also mentioned the mitochondrial function and upregulation. And so I think you hit on that he was wondering if there was a published study, and you did mention that as well.
Yeah, so we had a study going back to 2005 with Energy Enhancer on upregulating mitochondrial function. And then we have another study on it as well. We did urine analysis on that. The study on X39 and mitochondrial function hasn't been published yet, and that's related to COVID. A lot of our researchers got shut down, during this period. So, we've limped along this year with some of our research and pressed on with others, but that's going to be forthcoming.
Right. And you actually, as you're hitting on COVID, I think that, there's a lot of emotional challenges that people are having right now. And Dr. Barbara, who is a DC, she says, please tell us about the Nirvana supplement. Why did you choose the ingredients? Why do they work? And how is it synergistic with the patches?
So in the case of the Nirvana supplement, we had the privilege of working with a French scientist in Europe. He is a scuba diver, and he was scuba diving, and he happened to find a white seaweed, Padina pavinica. And what was interesting about this, he said, well, why is this seaweed white? And as he analyzed it, he's a biochemist, as he analyzed it in his lab, he found that there was a compound that was causing the seaweed to pull calcium ions from the seawater into this plant. So he began to isolate different naturally occurring compounds in the seaweed. And one of the things that he discovered is that one of the compounds could chronically stimulate production of beta endorphins. And this had two very important effects. First, beta endorphins help us feel happy. And from a practical point of view, beta endorphins are 20 to 30 times more powerful than morphine at relieving pain. Another benefit of beta endorphins, which you can't study in a traditional way, but when you elevate beta endorphins chronically, what happens is it triggers the fibroblast to increasing production of collagen. So Nirvana actually is a very powerful anti-aging product as well. But the key synergy here is that this scientist had the problem that it took 3 to 6 months for this nutrient to be absorbed by the cells and the levels to come up high enough in the body where they could be effective. And so I developed the Nirvana patch and found that we could increase the assimilation to where we were treating depression in as little as 3 weeks. And so we went from 3 to 6 months down to 3 weeks with Lifewave.
Well, and right now, don't we all need a little bit more joy?
We do. You know, we don't want to, Connie, I think it's fair to say we don't want to be in a state of fear. I would be happy to come back with another researcher and talk about this, because we just actually completed a study on this. We performed a study over the last 6 months, and what we found is that the anxiety over COVID is leading to devastating metabolic effects, including telomere shortening. We actually have evidence now that the stress from COVID is shortening telomeres and decreasing lifespan. And the way that people can combat this is to de-stress, remain calm, and to do activities that you, as a healthcare practitioner and doctor, are already familiar with, of supporting immune function. I will also say this, I can't get into all of this. We did a study on COVID-19 at a hospital in the United States, and I have to withhold some of the details because I don't want to run afoul with FDA. But what I can tell you is that one of the important parts of the study is that we gave people supplements of copper glycinate, 2.5 milligrams of copper glycinate daily. We found that, now these were medical doctors, nurses, and EMT workers. We found that and they were working in hospitals with COVID-19 patients, when they got infected with COVID-19, they were asymptomatic. So the important thing here is that people should feel empowered. There's natural antivirals, and there's plenty of things that people can do to protect themselves from this virus.
Perfect. Well, you also spoke, as we talked about the immune system. Barbara, who is a CNHP, said, how will X39 be effective in re-educating the body's immune system?
That's a tricky one because, you know, there have been warning letters sent by the FDA to companies making claims about enhanced immune function. You know, it's actually funny because pre-COVID, you could talk about supporting immune health all you wanted and really not have a problem with FDA. I think the concern is some companies went beyond that two of the essential oil companies, one of them specifically, they got 14 warning letters from the FDA because they were saying use these essential oils to protect yourself from COVID. And they really don't have any, business doing that without studies. But, the fact of the matter is there are a number of effects here. At our conference in the US, Melinda Connor presented her research data, and we very clearly showed that X39 was improving the health of the gut and the immune response. There are clinical studies that show copper peptides use in improving immune function, but I can't mention how because that'll get me in trouble, but it's there for anyone to see. Also, we know that the immune system becomes compromised over time because of the degradation of the cell signaling. So the intracellular, extracellular communications, cell communications within the cell, signal induction and signal transduction effects. So this will lead to autoimmune disorders like arthritis. So if we improve mitochondrial function, we improve cell health and cell signaling, and this happens with copper peptide because of gene modulation, this inevitably leads to an improved immune response.
I think you did that fabulously compliantly.
I'm trying. I'm doing it on the fly, Connie, so I'm doing my best.
Really well. So Dr. Liu, who is an MD, said, what inspired you to use some of the key Chinese medicine points to activate the entire body? And then a follow-up, can X39 increase levels of IGF-1, IgGB3, P3? So
I've been told I was Chinese in a previous life, which is probably true. I absolutely love Eastern medicine. I love acupuncture. I love TCM. And so I made a study of acupuncture for over 20 years. And I have practiced Qigong for about that period of time as well. But in any case, scientifically speaking, there is enough evidence now that the meridian system is real, right? They're essentially a network of collagen fibers, and it is faster than the signaling that occurs through the nervous system. And we know today that these collagen threads, which have electrolytes attached to them, are transparent to infrared light. And so effectively, the meridian system are fiber optic cables. So the points were selected for kind of optimum effect. So we use stomach 36 because it's clearly one of the most powerful points in the body. Kidney 1 on the bottom of the feet, we have just found through experience, is incredible at producing a relaxation response in the autonomic nervous system. So when we apply Lifewave there, of course, it helps to dramatically reduce pain. And of course, upregulating kidney energy anyway is going to be great for health. So that's a very, very lengthy subject, but I'll just say, because I've made a study of acupuncture and have had the opportunity to work with some great acupuncturists, this has been a collaboration that's developed over time. And so we have these points today because of these great people.
Fantastic. And Dr. Barber was also asking, so many times you have a patch that you develop for a particular use, and then you realize that it has other benefits. And one of those seems to be the SP6. It was created for food cravings. However, it seems to have the side benefit of balancing hormones. Can you explain that?
Dr. Homer Nazarian, we had a symposium in California. It was in 2009 and 2010, where we invited in all of our researchers that were working on different clinical studies. And one of the interesting things is Dr. Homer Nazarian, who's a biomedical engineer, did a meta-analysis of our studies. And he actually came to the conclusion that at that time, SP6 produced the strongest bioelectrical effect of any of the patches that we had. And so the point, of course, that we recommend is the spleen 6 point, the SP6 point on the inside of the left ankle. Well, That, of course, at that point is going to stimulate and sedate the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is going to regulate body temperature, immune response, hormones in the body. And so women that are going through menopause, for example, they stimulate SP6 with that patch, are going to find all of a sudden now that their symptoms, such as hot flashes, are going to be improving. So this is not a direct result of what the patch is doing biochemically, but rather its ability to increase the bioelectrical potential of the cell, increase cell signaling and nerve conduction, and as a result, we get greater activity in the hypothalamus.
And I just love the fact that it's a 2-for-1.
It is. Well, many of the patches, most of the patches are 2-for-1.
Most of them are, right?
Yeah, most of them, at least.
Sometimes even more. And she actually asked, too, that with some of these patches, we know that we're wearing our X39 every day, and with many of the patches, they are worn every day. However, she's asking that with patches like SP6 and carnosine, would it be preferable or best to use them every other day or daily? I know that it recommends, it seems to say in your literature, five times a week, that type of thing.
Yeah, so it really depends on what else you're doing. So, of course, as you know, you have to look at the body holistically. And I'm sure when you have a patient, you want to know, what are they eating? Are they exercising? Are they drinking water? Are they taking supplements? So it's one of those, it depends. So on a product like carnosine, if someone is exercising frequently, let's say 5 days per week, they might want to use carnosine more frequently because of the way that it's metabolized. But carnosine has a relatively long half-life as composed to glutathione, which is only about 7 minutes. So if someone were sedentary or they were only exercising 2 or 3 days a week, they might be able to get away with using carnosine 3-4 days a week. Someone that's athletic, they want to use it a little bit more. Glutathione, if someone had a job, let's say they were a welder and they were going to be exposed to toxic metals, they might want to use glutathione daily to protect themselves. On the other hand, if someone lived up in the mountains, they're breathing clean air, they have a clean diet, they might not need to detox with glutathione as frequently. So it really depends. And this is what's so amazing about having so many practitioners in the company, is that they get to help their patients customize how they use the patches.
Absolutely. And that's why that's so helpful. In fact, it actually leads in, I'm going to skip over to a question by Jana, who asked, if you live in an area where you have high copper and many test high for it, should you supplement?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily. So this is rather rare, but there is such a thing as copper toxicity, where individuals are prone to it. Not through, most people don't have to worry about developing any type of toxicity from copper. Suppose if someone was going to have liver every day, liver is very, very high in copper. You could get 30, 40, 50 milligrams easy. But even still, the detoxification pathways will clear out the excess copper very efficiently. So there were experiments where people were given injections of 50 milligrams of copper, and within 2 hours, the copper levels went down to normal. Now, that said, the RDA of copper is 900 micrograms per day. 2.5 milligrams is a standard over-the-counter dose. And Melinda and Connor and I, we've looked at research which shows up to 10 milligrams of copper daily is safe. But if someone were genetically predisposed to accumulation of copper, or if someone had metallic copper poisoning, then they shouldn't supplement with copper. There's no reason why they can't use X39, but they might want to avoid copper supplementation.
Yeah, the X39 would already have what it needed to do what it was doing, and there would be no need for it.
Right.
Dr. Amory, who ND, says, does glutathione help to chelate or remove aluminum as well as mercury? And for someone going through the chelation, would it be recommended to titrate the use?
Okay, so we did a study back in 2006 where we looked at 16 different heavy metals. So we were looking at mercury, aluminum, lead, arsenic, and as I recall, glutathione was a mild chelator of aluminum. However, carnosine is actually much better at chelating aluminum than glutathione is. I actually think that one of the reasons why people develop Alzheimer's disease is linked to aluminum toxicity. Of course, it's linked to beta amyloid 2 protein, but I tend to believe aluminum toxicity is involved there as well. And what we see in the literature is that carnosine is used to improve, not only improve cognitive function, but remove aluminum. And there's evidence, I don't want to make a claim about our patch because we haven't tested it, but you'll see in the literature that people are using carnosine as a therapeutic for people that have Alzheimer's disease. So in any case, I would look at, for chelation, I would look at glutathione and carnosine, and then of course, traditional IVs of things like EDTA are also going to be very effective.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that's great information on the carnosine. Dr. Pamela, who's an MD, said since the introduction of X39, which resets the stem cells to a younger you, why do you still need all the other metabolic type of patches, glutathione, carnosine, et cetera? And I think you've kind of nailed that, but if you want to expand on that at all, as well.
So basically, it's a great point because X39 covers so many bases. Most people that use X39 may not need any of the other patches, with a few very, very important exceptions. X39 does give a mild increase in glutathione. So for most people, that'll be fine. If someone wanted to go through a heavier detox, they'd use the glutathione patch. We can see up to a 300% increase in glutathione in 24 hours. We're not going to get that with X39. X39, as far as I can tell, is not going to elevate carnosine. So if someone wanted those benefits, they could use the carnosine patch. There's also huge synergy between X39 and EON. EON is a broad spectrum anti-inflammatory, and the two work really well. So I would definitely encourage practitioners to use X39 and EON. But definitely this practitioner is correct that X39 does indeed cover many of the benefits of the other products.
Perfect. Are you okay to answer a couple of more?
All right, let's do it.
Okay. So Jacqueline, who is the PT, says, if you have any information regarding the effect of the reduction of high blood pressure, more specifically to normalizing BP, can you speak to the X39 and the cardiovascular system benefits?
Yeah, I'm not sure we understand all the mechanisms yet of exactly how X39 reduces high blood pressure, but we consistently see this in clinical studies. More than, I think it's 3 clinical studies we have now where we've measured blood pressure, and in each case, people that have high blood pressure, so let's, as an example, people have gone from 140, 142 down to 125, 128. So that's rather significant. So what's going on there? I'm not sure if this is a simple mechanism where X39 is somehow inducing increases in nitric oxide. Is it possible? We have some anecdotal evidence that there's actually reduction in the accumulation of arterial plaque. We're not completely sure how it does that, but we see evidence of it.
Perfect. Dr. Rita, who SCDRN, asked, how do the crystals get created, from what source, and how are they tritated with the exact frequencies needed and manufactured?
Okay, so this is this is going to step on some proprietary trade secret.
I thought it might, but they asked, so.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Well, I can give you the simple answer. First thing is to figure out exactly, what is it that you want to do, which peptide do you want to synthesize, and this is something that we've learned in our research that the patch technology does really well is synthesize peptides, especially simple peptides like carnosine, glutathione, and GHK. Essentially, what I do is I look at relevant data on the structure of a peptide, the molecular weight, other information, and I have a model that I've developed, and then essentially I use naturally occurring compounds. There's not going to be anything in the patches that are toxic, and the building materials that I found that I really like to use are naturally occurring amino acids, sugars, and putting them into water-based solutions. And effectively, I have been literally making crystals since I was about 14 years old. But as, you know, essentially, the crystals are fabricated, if you will. They're grown like any normal crystal with supersaturated solutions, and then they're deposited onto a polyester fabric, and this is done at very high speed. And so, you know, we made, I think, over 30 million patches last year, as an example. So yeah, there's some trade secret information there, but essentially the crystals are made from amino acids and sugars and other natural materials.
Well, I think our last few questions might be a little bit more, a little simpler and not so much around proprietary information.
Right.
Somebody who has working with several dentists, biological dentists, would like to know what they should be carrying and what best would support their patients in their practice.
So I have a good friend of mine. He was my lab partner in college, and he's a dentist today in Connecticut. And we've been exploring the use of our patches in dental surgery for aftercare because anecdotally, many of our members have done this and had great success with it. Generally speaking, what people have used is X39, Icewave, and Eon. And the reasons are fairly obvious because X39 is going to help with repair and Eon is going to help to manage inflammation. Icewave as well. And we don't have time to get into all of the protocols, but if a dentist wanted to try this, I would recommend X39 on the back of the neck and then Eon at the point of the surgery or the point of the dental pain.
Fabulous. And that's going to be across the board in many practices. You're going to find that where they're managing pain, they're managing inflammation.
Sure, of course, absolutely.
Absolutely. So we have John, who is an MT, and Dr. Carol, who is an MD, that have asked, can you help people to understand why some people feel worse initially instead of feeling better using the patches?
Sure. This is going to be Herxheimer's reaction detox effect. So we know that fats are going to hold on to different toxins, and most people, unfortunately, today, they don't have the cleanest diet. They don't drink enough water. They're taking things they shouldn't be. And so they're going to accumulate these toxins in the body fats. And when you use a product like X39, it's going to increase beta oxidation, fat burning. And so these toxins get mobilized. So if someone is not drinking enough water, they're not exercising, they're not moving the lymphatic system, they're going to experience things like headaches, fatigue, and nausea. So they should be removing the patch and drinking lots of water. But that's initially, you could say, first 3 to 5 days might be common when this happens to people. And of course, it's a good thing. We want to get rid of those toxins.
Absolutely. And, you know, I noticed it initially and didn't think I really had anything to repair until I started noticing some retracing and some things happening 2 months, 6 months in. But initially there was some dry mouth and whatnot. And I have found that seems to be telling you it's working. Hydrate, it's doing its job.
Yeah, many people find that they are also thirsty all the time. And of course, people should listen to their body and drink more water and help get those toxins out. So being thirsty is also, part of that initial startup period.
Well, if we talk about even in our instructions, I think sometimes it's overlooked that the number two thing, besides 12 hours on, 12 hours off, is that to stay very well hydrated, and it really
Absolutely.
makes all the difference in the world. So it is something we want
Absolutely.
to make sure to tell our clients and our patients about because it can be overlooked. Dr. Tatiana, ND, asked a question. And she wanted to know, this is a question that comes up a lot. I'm not sure how much you can go into this, but she said, for those on chemotherapy, before, during, and after, what patches or protocols might be best? We know Eon is anti-inflammatory and anti-stress, but what other benefits might there be?
Oh, well,
I
this could
saved
be
the best for last.
yeah, you did. So we've actually worked with an oncologist in Italy, and so we have quite a bit of data on this. So the first thing I'd say is we don't want to make any claims about treating cancer. Um, if we look at this first from the point of view of aftercare, so let's say that you have an individual, they have gone through chemotherapy, radiation, what have you, and we want to do things like improve their rate of recovery, improve their energy, reduce incidence of nausea. Then using energy patches on the wrists at the pericardium 6 point, that is well recognized even by FDA as a point that can help prevent nausea. So that might be one thing. We actually did use the glutathione patch and the energy patches with this oncologist in a study in Rome. And what we found was that we could dramatically reduce incidence of nausea after chemotherapy. And we also saw people recovered much more quickly. They didn't have those dips in energy that most people have. What I would end with is that the mechanisms behind how cancer works has been known for decades, since the 1940s. And in fact, there's been Nobel Prizes that have been awarded. Otto Warburg, of course, won 2 Nobel Prizes on studying the anaerobic mechanisms of cancer cells. And this, of course, is why oxidative therapies are so powerful. So in any case, I would say if a practitioner would be interested in using the patches with their patients that have cancer and they wanted just to support overall health and well-being, I would be looking at things like X39 and Eon.
Thank you again for your time.
Absolutely, Connie. Thank you. Always a privilege. Nice to see you.
You too.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin.
But what we do want to close with is just have a few practitioners, a few that have been around a while and a few that are really quite new, share a little bit about their experience with Lifewave. So I'm going to start out with my sponsor, Dr. Nicholas.
My name's Dr. Nicholas Tipley. I'm a chiropractor in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been a chiropractor for 22 years. And we found Lifewave 12 years ago. And again, hearing David speak, you can see why I'm still here and still as excited as the first day ever. Just seeing and hearing what he said. I share this with patients daily, and I see many miracles. I call them miracles because that's what happens. And the clinical outcomes of what I've had happen in our practice is it's a perfect marriage for what we do. We personally brought in over 500 docs in our 12 years, and it's shown them how to integrate into their practices. So no matter what type of a practitioner you are, there's a perfect place for you. The technology fits in any style of practice, and your clinical outcomes, as you heard Connie say, will dramatically improve. And whether you just use it for yourself personally or you use it for a therapy in your practice or sell it or get more involved like I have. I love the business and I love the freedom. It's been the best 12 years and I can't wait to see what's coming because it's only going to get better. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nicholas. It has been a joy for me to learn from you. And Dr. Jeff, you can put your camera on and let us see who you are. There you are. Great. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Robin. It's so exciting to talk to everyone this evening. And I'm a physician here in Dallas, Texas. I've been out of school and kind of practicing for about 4 years now. I'm the young buck of the group, I guess. And I was introduced to Lifewave about 8 months ago. It's been such an interesting and fascinating ride thus far, both personally and professionally. I mean, there's so many different aspects to the technology that make me excited. My focus and emphasis is on preventative medicine and lifestyle medicine, and so it integrates perfectly with what I do with my patients. They're oftentimes looking for a holistic, sort of non-pharmaceutical approach to being in a better state of health. And so this is just an excellent tool in my tool bag for a lot of different reasons. I mean, we've seen improvements with cognitive function. We've seen wound healing. We've seen blood sugar and blood pressure improvement. I mean, there's just been so many different things that I can share with you guys that are excellent and are really beneficial for all types of pathologies and things that you're going to come in contact with, depending upon your particular and respective practices of healthcare. And so just excited to be here as always. And I just can't say enough. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Jeff. Wonderful to have you. And it means so much to all of us in the field to have practitioners like yourselves to really sharing the great news. And as Dr. Nicholas says, and I quote him all the time, enhance the clinical outcome of the work you do with your patients. We have got Dr. Walt, and you should now be able to.
Yeah.
There you are.
Hi.
What
Hi,
kind of
everybody.
physician are you?
So I'm the older of all the physicians. I'm an acupuncture physician. I started out in 1974 in Western medicine and made my way up into going to China in 1990, studying there for 3 months, then finishing the 4-year program in Miami to become a nationally boarded acupuncture physician. So I was really happy to hear David like our medicine, which is traditional Chinese medicine. I have seen a great increase in compliance and happiness of my patients. Basically, my patients know that the two things that I ask them to tell me about are if they have pain or insomnia, because if you're not, if you have pain, you're not healing, and if you have insomnia, you're not really healing. So with the patches, I have been able to address those two areas pretty much immediately, with especially with the pain aspect of it, and the compliance has been very good. After that, we explain it to the patients, and they're off and running to become customers. So I'm really happy. You know, the features, advantages, and benefits of this company, it's a no-brainer to me. I'm very happy to be with everybody, and I'm really happy that Dr. Jeffrey, he spoke tonight. You know, he's a young physician, and boy, he's right at the beginning of this wonderful paradigm shift that we're going to experience. So congratulations, Dr. Jeffrey. Thank you.
I'm going to go to one more brief testimonial from a homeopath out of Arizona, Dr. Jana, and she's just got a quick story to share that's so amazing that she wanted to share it this evening.
Yes,
So
I've been in practice for 35 years, and one of my most dramatic experiences with Lifewave came at the beginning of my experience with Lifewave. I had a patient come in who had 2 years before had some strokes and things, and she had taken 2 years to rehabilitate, to be able to walk and talk again. And I thought I'd experiment with something, and so I put the energy patches in a hat, her husband's hat actually, which were the 10 on the left and the back, and the white on the front and the right. And at the top of the hat, I put X39 and carnosine, and I put it on her head. And we spoke for about 10 minutes. And at the end of the 10 minutes, I said, well, you know, it's a little early, but let's see if you can write, because the one thing she could never do was write again and sign her name. And I gave her a pad and a pen, and she wrote her name for the first time. And that ability never left her. She walked out knowing that she could write, and her daughter confirmed that she was writing beautifully after that.
what we say in this business all the time is wow. Thank you so much, Donna. Wonderful to hear that story. And there is a brain balancing protocol for everyone to know about that synchronizes brain frequencies for, stroke patients, TBIs, for people with neurologically based illnesses, for people that have had mental imbalances. It seems to do amazing things by putting the patches in the hat. And I think everybody knows, and if you don't know, well, actually, that we have a lot of guests here tonight. The patches don't even need to touch your body. They're activated from 3 to 6 inches from your body. So, and they work on animals also. We have 5 animals, and 4 of the 5 get patches. So amazing stories. We have a horse website. We have incredible animal stories. So we have veterinarians coming on board. We did this for you as healthcare practitioners, for you as distributors and customers that want to reach out to practitioners to give them, David, the best of David. And what we are so blessed and privileged to have David and have this amazing science. So if you are a guest this evening, please get back to the person, who invited you. And as a practitioner, you have an option. Use it for yourself, share it with your patients and clients. If you want to continue to share with other practitioners or your patients, you can actually develop a lovely income. And Dr. Joan was going to talk about the business, and I'll just briefly share that Dr. Joan has an extensive background in business. She's also a chiropractor of 20 plus years and has been involved with Lifewave over 12 years. And she didn't understand network marketing. And I think, like a lot of other practitioners and a lot of other people in general, have judgment about this profession. And I know when people have judgment about it, they've either had a less than stellar experience or they really just don't understand what it was. And what Dr. Joan did is she became a student. She learned about the profession. And the more she learned, the more she fell in love with it. And now she's totally in love with it because it's dramatically changed her life. And it's wonderful to know that whether you're putting the hours in or not, the dollars keep showing up. So there is an opportunity if that's something that's a fit for you. And as Dr. Nicholas said, there's many different ways to incorporate it into your practice. Reach out to the person who invited you, and we can help you find the best way to incorporate it into your practice. This time we're going to say goodbye to everybody. I hate to go because it's been so wonderful, but thank you all. Bye-bye.